Hey everyone, I hope you've had a great day so far and that you're doing well. For this video, we'll be going through an unboxing and review of a older Studio Series figure. Here we have Studio Series Deluxe Class Dropkick, and this is the 46th release of the Studio Series line. But this is the second release of Dropkick, this time sporting his Earth-based muscle car alt mode compared to the Apache that I did several weeks ago. So just basically wrapping up all the things for Dropkick. As for this particular figure, released by Hasbro, Jakara Tommy as always, and in terms of the year, it may have very well been 2019. Not exactly recent, but anyway, let's get straight into it. So here we have Dropkick in his muscle car version. Usual artwork on the front, given the age of the figure itself. Still have a lot of plastic here, which is fine. And we do have Dropkick front and center in there as well. So I'm very interested to see how he goes, given that his helicopter version wasn't terrible. It had its strengths, also had its weaknesses. So that's the front of the packaging. Straight to the back, 26 steps of conversion between his robot mode and his vehicle mode. Didn't realize he was a Chrysler. The more you know. What do we have here in terms of, we do have a usual backdrop, images of other releases of around the time. But in terms of the blurb for Dropkick, what do we have here? Arriving on Earth in 1987, Dropkick disguises himself as a 1974 AMC Javelin and begins his search for Autobot criminals. What's with the two? Doesn't matter. So there you go. Nice little blurb about Dropkick. He does look like he will be pretty cool in his robot mode, so it'll be interesting to see how that translates over. Okay. Also just a quick shot of the side of this box as well. So, box side of things done. Time to crack him open, have a look at everything that's included. And with everything out of the packaging, one weapon, which we'll have a better look at later on. One included Dropkick, who does feel fairly solid and actually doesn't look half bad. The manual, which is all pretty stock standard, and off screen, the backdrop, which seems to be, I think this is the diner that Shatter and Dropkick arrived nearby. It's been a while since I've seen the movie. So just putting Dropkick in there. Definitely not too bad looking. Obviously for sake of video, this is not working very well, but that's fine. I'll try and get some better shots of Dropkick with his backdrop in parallel in some shape or form. But definitely not too bad looking. I will admit I actually really do like the blue and the black for Dropkick on this. So before we get too carried away, quick look at the manual. So we know that's going to be the 26 steps to convert him across, so without spending too much time on every exact precise step, that's the first 19. I'm a little bit worried from steps 11 onwards, but that's okay. It's, yeah, it's workable. It's workable, it's not terrible. And how everything comes together. This should be very interesting. And we do have a nice shot just equipping his weapon in his hand, which didn't take too much effort. And 45, 47 releases, Autobot Drift and Constructicon Hightown. And I will get to those eventually. So that was the manual. Come back to that. The weapon, unfortunately just a pure solid black. But in saying that, it does have some very nice detailing on it. It's just unfortunate that it doesn't visually come up quite well unless you look at it quite closely. So very cool. It's just unfortunate that it doesn't come up. Now, and this is why we have the manual off screen, because I'm looking at that and going, how does the actual weapon attach? Apparently it just slides on. But how does... I'm going to assume his hand has to go away, and then there's some type of... There we go. So, not very well mentioned in the manual. His hand will need to flip inward, and in fact both sides will have it. There's a nice little tab here that will go into the inside of the weapon. So it's not the conventional style of put it into the hand. It's actually transform the hand out of the way and then tab it on to the arm. And admittedly, now that I know that, it actually doesn't look that bad. In fact, it does feel a bit more seamless than what we've seen with Bumblebee in the past. Now, in saying that, it's probably not as seamless here from the side, but there you go. So that is Dropkick with his accessory equipped. So take that off, redeploy the hand. And that's it. We'll see this again in his vehicle mode, which hopefully will not be too difficult to put on. Now, Dropkick, before we get too carried away, can you stand on your own 2 feet? Yes, you can. Front of Dropkick, from the side, the back, the other side, and can we do a bit of a close-up without banging anything? Yes, maybe, kind of. Trying to get a bit of a close-up on his face, but it's not going very well. In fact, there we go. So, Dropkick's pretty much sporting very solid dark blue and black motif color scheme, and it actually works really well. In fact, I like this blue compared to his helicopter version. He does have silver and some other colors like this red and things like that throughout his main body, just to add some splashes of color. So overall, visually, I actually do like Dropkick, at least this version, which gives me a bit of hope for Shadow. Yeah, definitely good on the colors. I quite like it. Now, before I get too carried away with the articulation, now he does have some back kibble, but in saying that, and cars will always do this, it's actually not too bad. If I just put his side doors to the side, his roof and back roof windows, etc., all appear to just fold up quite nicely, so it actually does sit relatively flush, whereas with others you do actually notice a very pronounced back of stuff. So whilst the kibble is there, it's visually not terrible. In fact, some of his kibbling on his leg is probably a little bit more eye-catching than his actual back. So even when his side doors are up like that, it's actually not too bad. It actually does look quite nice. Although every time I look at him, for some reason he's reminding me of like combinations of Barricade and Bumblebee. But anyway. Articulation. Let's try and make this super quick. His head will do a full 360 in there, which is very cool. And there's a little bit of tilt up, not really a lot of tilt down. But the important thing is that he can definitely rotate side to side, which is the important thing. As for the arm, can definitely go all the way around. Can only go out about 45, well, probably a bit more than 45 degrees to the side, which is unusual. You would think that the arm would be able to go fully out, but it cannot. We do have a standard elbow bend, which is good. It can also go back a little bit as well, but it does look a little bit janky. there will also be a nice 360 spin at the elbow as well. So overall, you can definitely get some nice posing with the arm. And just swiveling it out to the side. Whilst the wrist doesn't have any useful articulation, we now know that the wrist will transform and fold in for the purposes of using the accessory. So that is the arms. There appears to be zilch in terms of the waist in an articulation sense. So that'll be interesting. Let's see what his legs can actually do, because if the legs aren't great, then that could make posing very interesting. It looks like he can come pretty close to doing a full split, which is very cool. Plus he doesn't have a lot of things around the waist area that would prevent his legs from going that far out. In terms of the legs themselves, all the way to the front, pretty much all the way to the back, which is really cool. And as we know, from the split, we know it can go out so far. Putting the leg back forward, in terms of the knee bend, standard knee. Obviously don't do what I do and see what type of rotation there is. Now looking at that piece there is some rotation in the hip. Just be mindful to use the rotation within the hip and not pull out the leg from the socket. Nothing really in the way in the lower leg after the knee. The feet can pretty much go all the way forward, a little bit back. There'll be a bit of hinge within the ankle itself, so that's actually not too bad. How much of that is because of transformation? I'm sure most of it is. So that is a nice little breakdown of Dropkick and his articulation. So definitely not too bad in terms of articulation. In fact, it's fairly standard for a deluxe class. There's nothing really over and extra, but at the same time I don't think he is under articulated. So I think overall from robot mode, definitely not too bad. So now that we've done the robot mode, I will do the 26 steps conversion and then have a quick look at his alt mode and then present my final thoughts. Okay, and with Dropkick now in his alt mode, I will admit I did start using the instructions and then it just actually got to a point where everything actually felt fairly intuitive and I just went with it. So from a transformation perspective, it actually isn't too bad. It looks like it's going to be a bit of a mess, but it actually wasn't. I did have a few trouble spots, mainly just putting his side doors on. I feel that things just aren't tabbing together all that nicely, but it's okay for the time being. And I do run the usual caveat of first transformation tends to be the messiest, especially as I figure out things. But overall, isn't too bad. Now I have put the accessory on, and it seems a little archaic with how it's put on. It just basically clips onto the actual back of the quote-unquote, what are those things called? I suddenly can't remember the name of it. Anyway, it clips onto the back. And if I was to take it off, that's pretty much how it looks like. So that's pretty much what it looks like with it on. It's not too bad, but once again, it does look really weird. So for the purpose of the video, I will keep that off for the time being. So, Dropkick in his vehicle mode. So from the front, albeit an angle, side, the back, the other side, from the top, and from the bottom. Now, surprisingly, from the bottom, it actually does look relatively neat. The only thing that looks a little bit sus is probably just from the back. You do get to see bits of the back of his feet, but otherwise, everything actually looks pretty okay. In fact, if anything, it kind of reminds me of the recent Bumblebee Studio Series figure. I'll probably have to do a comparison with that one at some point in time anyway. In terms of colours, still the same colours. It's predominantly the blue and the black. We do get a bit of clear now through the windows. Still get some of that silver on the front, and we just have some of this white now on various parts of the body just for the exterior detailing, which helps to break up some of those two dark colours. But overall, I actually don't mind the look of his alt mode. And as I said, the transformation actually wasn't too bad to get to it. In terms of articulation, like any other type of four-wheeled vehicle, the wheels will move, they'll move independently, so that's not a problem. Otherwise, being a vehicle alt mode, there will be no further articulation. But I will say, overall, I dig the look. Definitely my preferred of the two Dropkicks. So, what I'll now do is, so with the manual back in view, the robot mode. Visual aesthetic is actually quite nice. I do prefer the aesthetic of this version of Dropkick compared to his helicopter version. Helicopter version wasn't too bad, it definitely was unique, but this one seems a lot more aligned to what Dropkick looks like in the movie. Colors are very nice, the articulation, standard deluxe, how the weapon accessory integrates isn't too bad. Overall, it actually doesn't seem too bad from what I've experienced within this video. Time will tell if some of that articulation starts to weaken over time when I do the shorts. So, thoughts on the robot mode? Definitely not too bad. I actually quite like it. Transformation, as I mentioned, does actually start becoming very, very intuitive over time. So once you get started, a few steps in, things will actually just make a lot more sense. And yeah, I was expecting it to take longer. It didn't. So transformation wise, I quite enjoyed it. Final alt mode, visual aesthetic is still very nice. Most of the robot components do tuck away relatively nicely on the underneath, with the exception of just bits of the hind feet showing in the rear. Visually it does look very nice, I quite like it, the colours are still good, so definitely doing a pretty good rating on the alt mode. Still very 50-50 about the accessory being on it, but I tend to always have that stance anyway. So I guess the final thoughts on Dropkick in terms of the muscle car release version of Dropkick. Overall, I was actually very, very surprised. I'm actually glad I didn't do this this version of Dropkick first, because I think I would have been, I don't want to say less pleased, but I think it was definitely very nice to do this version of Dropkick as the second version, as a way to wrap up all things Dropkick. Everything has actually been quite pleasing, aesthetically nice, and just handled fairly well. I don't actually have a lot of significant criticisms about the figure. Yes, it could have a bit more articulation. Yes, it could have a bit more paint apps and things like that. But there's definitely no major significant grievance with the figure. I think the only grievance I have is I wish the instruction manual was a little bit clearer with the accessory attachment for the robot mode. But other than that, I've quite enjoyed this version of Dropkick. I'll definitely try and do some shorts over time of Dropkick, both versions of Dropkick together. Ultimately, I'll try and do one with Dropkick and Shatter, and given the alt modes for this version of Dropkick and most likely next week's video for Shatter, I actually wouldn't mind doing those two with the latest version of Bumblebee. Granted, that version of Bumblebee is more from Rise of the Beasts, but I think there's a bit of parallels there that'd be interesting to compare the three against. Now this version of Dropkick, as I said at the very beginning of the video, came out back in 2019. He will be hard to find. So if anyone is actually somewhat inspired after this unboxing video, I will say I wish you luck. Plenty of people probably picked him up back in the day, and I'm sure a few more people probably picked him up when he was re-released in the buzzworthy Bumblebee line. So, and even then that was actually about probably at least a year ago. So as I said, to anyone who's now inspired to try and get their copy of Dropkick, as I said, good luck. Hopefully the pricing will be in your favor, assuming you can find one. So I'm going to leave the unboxing and review video there for Dropkick. Overall, quite happy with this version of Dropkick. As I mentioned probably only a mere minute ago, next week's video will most likely be the vehicle version. Well, of course it's a vehicle version. It'll be the car version of Shatter. So possibly this video is going to set some higher expectations. Time will tell. But I'm hoping Shatter will be a very pleasant figure to have in the muscle car version. Her jet mode version wasn't too bad. The jet mode itself was beautiful. The rock mode, Anyway, I have links, well, cards to those previous videos as well, if you want to have a look. Thank you very much for watching this unboxing and review video of Studio Series Deluxe Class Dropkick. Feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the content. All of this does help support the channel, and I do greatly appreciate it. Extra content can also be found on my Instagram account, same handle as the YouTube channel, and I'm sure by now people have probably caught on to the fact that there will be a supplementary short that is released with this video when it goes live, and I do intend down the track to try and create a few more shorts when I have a bit more time, because I do know multiple figures and single shorts, time to create them increases exponentially, and unfortunately I only have so much time in my day. With that being all said and done, stay safe and take care, and I will catch you all in a future video, which hopefully will be next week's video on Shatter. Otherwise there should be plenty of other videos on the channel that may tickle your fancy. Until the next time, see ya.